You bought the plants. You filled the pots. You spent a Saturday afternoon arranging everything just the way you wanted it. And for a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months, your patio looked exactly the way you always imagined it could. And then it didn't. The cold came, or the heat came, or life just got busy. And one by one, things started dying back. And come spring, there you were again, standing in the garden center, spending money on the same plants you bought last year, starting the whole thing from scratch all over again. Here is what nobody at that garden center is going to tell you. The problem is not your pots. It is not your climate. It is not even your schedule. It is the plants. Because you have been buying annuals, plants designed by nature to live one season and die, when there is an entirely different category of plant that comes back every single year in the same pot, sometimes fuller and more beautiful than the year before, requiring almost nothing from you in return. Today we are going through 8 of them, 8 perennials that you plant once. And then, for years, they simply come back. Stay with me, because the final plant on this list is one that almost nobody thinks to grow in a container. Most people walk right past it at the garden center without a second glance. And it may genuinely be the most effortless of everything we cover today. If you believe your garden should be beautiful without feeling like a second job, hit subscribe right now. That is exactly what Golden Garden Secrets is built around every single week. Let's get into it. Most people assume Echinacea belongs in a large open garden bed. It is one of those plants people picture in sweeping borders or wild prairie plantings. Big, bold, taking up space, and so it never occurs to most gardeners to put it in a pot. That assumption is quietly costing them one of the best container perennials in existence. In a generous container, especially one of the newer compact varieties bred for smaller spaces, Magnus, Powwow Wild Berry, Cheyenne Spirit, Echinacea is completely and surprisingly at home. Those bold, daisy-like flowers with their distinctive raised orange-brown cones rise on tall stems above rich, deep green foliage from midsummer through early autumn. And then, if you leave the seed heads standing instead of cutting them down in autumn, goldfinches and small birds visit through winter to feed on them. The container stays alive and interesting long after the growing season has ended. Echinacea is hardy in zones 3 through 9. It is extremely drought-tolerant once established. This plant is native to dry prairies and open meadows, and it has not forgotten that. Full sun is essential, at least 6 hours. For containers, go bigger than you think you need. A minimum of 14 to 16 inches wide and at least 12 inches deep. Echinacea has a deep taproot and cramping. That root system is the fastest way to kill it in a container. Use standard potting mix, skip the slow-release fertilizer, and water once a week in summer, allowing the soil to dry significantly between waterings. Here is the mistake most beginners make. They cut the plant down completely in autumn to make the container look tidy. Leave the seed heads standing. The birds will find them. And next spring, when the plant pushes back up from the roots, it will be stronger for having been left alone. By year 2, a container Echinacea becomes something genuinely spectacular. A large glazed ceramic pot covered in bold pink and purple cones from July through September, buzzing with bees and butterflies from morning through late afternoon. Then in January, the dried architectural seed heads still standing, a goldfinch balanced on one of them in the pale winter light. One plant, one container, 12 months of interest. Sedum is one of the most underestimated container perennials you will ever come across. Most gardeners walk past it at the garden center because it does not look exciting in a small pot. It looks almost like nothing, low, fleshy, unremarkable. And that is exactly why most people miss it. The fleshy, succulent leaves store water the same way cacti do, which means sedum handles dry spells, neglect, and heat without complaint. Forget to water it for 2 weeks in summer, sedum does not care. In late summer, it produces thick broccoli-like flower heads in dusty rose or deep pink that gradually deepen to rich copper and rust as autumn arrives. And then, even after frost, those dried seed heads remain on the plant, holding their shape, catching frost, remaining genuinely ornamental when every other container on the patio has gone brown and empty. Sedum is hardy in zones 3 through 9. Full sun is ideal. In too much shade, the stems grow leggy, and the compact structure collapses. Terracotta or unglazed ceramic containers are ideal because they breathe and dry quickly. A pot 12 inches wide and 10 inches deep suits most varieties. Avoid deep containers since sedum has a shallow root system. Use a lean, gritty growing mix. Standard potting mix cut generously with coarse perlite. Water once a week in summer, far less in autumn, and almost nothing through winter. Here is the mistake that catches most beginners. They plant sedum in rich moisture-retentive potting soil and then watch it grow tall, floppy, and weak. The dense, nutrient-heavy mixes that most gardeners reach for by instinct are actually the worst possible choice for this plant. A lean, gritty mix that drains almost immediately after watering is what sedum genuinely wants. It sounds counterintuitive the first time you hear it. It works every single time. Picture a terracotta pot on your patio in November. Everything else is dormant. But the sedum is still there. Its dried flower heads now a deep burnished copper. Frost sitting on the edges of the petals in the early morning light. It does not look dead. It looks deliberate. That is what a well-established sedum container gives you. A 12-month plant that earns its space in every season. Here is something that surprises most people the first time they grow hostas in a container. Every autumn the leaves die completely back to the soil. The pot goes empty. Bare soil, nothing visible, nothing happening. It looks like the plant is gone. And then in April, sometimes almost overnight, tight little shoots push up from the soil and unfurl into enormous architectural leaves that look almost too beautiful to be real. Hostas are almost impossible to kill. Some varieties produce foliage in deep blue-green. Others are bright chartreuse or golden. Some are striped in cream and green in a way that looks like something chosen deliberately by a designer. In the right light, the foliage becomes almost jewel-like, rich, textured, and deeply beautiful in a way that very few other container plants achieve. Hostas are hardy in zones 3 through 9. One of the most cold-tolerant perennials on this list. They prefer partial shade to full shade. Morning sun with afternoon shade is ideal. Direct afternoon sun in warm climates scorches the leaves and fades the color significantly. Choose a wide pot over a deep one. 14 to 16 inches wide suits most medium varieties. Plastic or resin pots retain moisture better than terracotta, which suits hostas perfectly. Water regularly through spring and summer, allowing the top inch to dry between waterings, but never letting the soil dry out completely. The mistake beginners make is always the same one. A pot that is too small. A cramped hosta stops producing new leaves. The existing ones look tired, slightly yellowed at the edges, and the whole plant stalls. It does not die, but it does not thrive either. When you think the pot is big enough, go one size larger. By year 3, that hosta container becomes one of the most quietly beautiful things on your patio. A wide dome of overlapping leaves in deep blue-green or bright gold, effortlessly lush, requiring almost nothing. Some container hostas have been growing in the same pot for over a decade, still beautiful, still reliable, still returning. Perennial salvia is one of those plants that simply refuses to quit. From early summer through the first hard frost, it keeps sending up tall flowering spikes in deep violet, rich blue, or vivid red depending on the variety you choose. The foliage is gray-green and softly aromatic. The whole plant has a kind of wild billowing quality that draws the eye across a patio. Cut it back by a third in midsummer, and it responds within weeks with a completely fresh wave of growth and another full round of blooms. By year 2, the base has thickened into something almost woody, and the plant blooms more generously than it did in its first season. Hummingbirds visit in the morning. Bees work through it all afternoon. It is one of the longest blooming perennials you can grow in a container, and it does all of this without demanding much in return. Here is what catches most beginners with salvia. They skip the midsummer trim. The spent flower spikes sit there. The plant puts all its energy into seed production instead of new growth. And by August, the whole thing looks tired and defeated. A single hard cut of 1/3 of the plant's height in midsummer takes 3 minutes and triggers a fresh flush of growth within 2 weeks. That second wave of blooms in late summer and autumn is often the most beautiful the plant produces all year. 3 minutes of work, months of reward. By year 3 or 4, that salvia container has become something genuinely architectural. A dense, woody-based mound of gray-green foliage with those tall, flowering spikes rising above it from June through October. Every year it comes back a little fuller, a little stronger, a little more spectacular than the year before. Every individual daylily flower lasts exactly 1 day. One morning it opens, and by evening it has closed and will not open again. But the plant does not stop. Compact reblooming varieties like Stella d'Oro, Happy Returns, or Rosy Returns keep this cycle going from early summer through the first hard frost. Months of daily fresh flowers from a single container plant. The strap-like arching foliage stays lush and green through the entire season, hardy in zones 3 through 9. They tolerate heat, drought, humidity, and cold. Give them at least 6 hours of direct sun for the best bloom production. You need a generous container, minimum 14 inches wide and 12 inches deep. Daylilies form thick, fleshy root masses that fill containers quickly. Use standard potting mix with moderate watering and a slow-release fertilizer each spring. Every 2 to 3 years, divide the root mass to start new pots. The mistake beginners make is putting daylilies in too small a container. The root mass becomes overcrowded and bloom production drops significantly. If this happens, just repot into a larger container or divide the roots, and the plant recovers completely. If you are already picturing one of these 5 on your patio or balcony right now, smash that like button and drop a comment below. Which of these 5 are you most excited to try first? I will read every single comment. We have 3 more to go, And the final one is the one I promised you at the very beginning. Creeping thyme does not grow upward. It grows outward, spreading in a tight, fragrant mat of tiny leaves that hugs the soil and spills over the edges of the container. In late spring, it transforms completely, disappearing under a dense carpet of tiny purple or pink flowers that attract pollinators. Brush your hand across it, and there is that warm, herby fragrance. Hardy in zones 4 through 9, full sun is essential, at least 6 hours. In too much shade, it grows thin and loose. Wide, shallow containers work better than deep ones. A low terracotta bowl, 12 to 16 inches wide, is ideal. Allow the soil to dry between waterings, once a week in summer and significantly less in autumn and winter. Do not fertilize. The mistake beginners make is overwatering and then responding to the plant's decline by giving it more care. When creeping thyme gets too much water, it thins out and develops bare patches. The answer is simply to water less and do nothing else. Step back and wait. The plant recovers on its own within weeks. By year 2 or 3, that wide, shallow container becomes genuinely breathtaking. The entire surface disappears under a carpet of purple flowers, and once they fade, the neat green mat remains beautiful for the rest of the season. There is a reason lavender appears on every low-maintenance list ever written. This plant practically thrives on neglect. Give it dry soil, a terracotta pot, and full sun, and it rewards you with long silvery stems, purple flower spikes, and that warm, impossible-to-replicate fragrance. Hardy in zones 5 through 9, full sun is essential, minimum 6 hours, 8 is better. Terracotta is the ideal container because it breathes and dries out quickly. Use a pot at least 12 inches deep and wide, with non-negotiable drainage holes. Fill it with lean, well-draining soil. Standard potting mix cut with coarse perlite or sand. Water every 7 to 10 days in summer, far less in autumn, and barely at all in winter. In zones 5 and below, move the container into an unheated garage or shed for winter. The mistake that catches most beginners is overwatering. The leaves start yellowing at the base, the stems go woody, and the whole plant slowly collapses. Most people assume it needs more water, which makes it worse. When in doubt, wait another 3 days before watering. By June of the second year, the lavender in that terracotta pot pushes up dozens of long silver-purple spikes. You brush your hand across the stems as you pass, and that fragrance follows you inside every single summer without fail. And now we arrive at the one most people walk straight past at the garden center without a second glance. It does not produce dramatic blooms or tall flowering spikes, and yet it may genuinely require less from you than anything else. Creeping Jenny does one thing: it cascades. Long trailing stems of small, perfectly round chartreuse or golden green leaves spill over the edges of whatever container it is planted in. It fills gaps between other plants without crowding them and softens the harsh lines of a pot edge. In winter, it dies back completely to the soil, and in spring, from bare soil, without any help, it returns. Hardy in zones 3 through 9, Creeping Jenny actually prefers moist conditions and tolerates occasional overwatering without complaint. Give it partial shade to full sun. The golden variety holds its best luminous color in dappled light. Any container works, using standard potting mix and regular watering. The mistake beginners make is constraining it by planting it tightly packed with no room to trail. When it is constrained, it loses the one feature that makes it extraordinary. Those long trailing stems are the entire point. Give it an edge to spill over and let those stems hang freely. Picture a tall ceramic pot with salvia or echinacea rising through the center and creeping jenny cascading over the edges in long, bright chartreuse curtains. It keeps growing, trailing and returning every single year from the roots, without asking for a single thing in return. None of these 8 plants are complicated. None of them demand weekends of work, shelves full of products, or constant monitoring. They just need the right pot, drainage, light, and watering that suits their nature. And then mostly just patience, because that is what container perennial gardening rewards above everything else. The willingness to plant something, step back, and trust it. The echinacea you plant this spring will still be coming back 5 years from now. That hosta will unroll its enormous leaves in April, and you will feel wonder at a plant you thought was gone for good. That creeping jenny will cascade a little further over the edge of its pot every season. These are not just plants. Over time, they become part of the story of your home, the quiet, reliable presence of something that does not need you to be perfect to be beautiful. Which one of these 8 are you planting first? Drop it in the comments right now. I want to know what your patio is going to look like next spring. And if you have not subscribed yet, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and I will see you in the next one, where we cover the one container mistake that kills more perennials than anything else, and the 30-second fix most gardeners never know about.